We all have our favorite writers. Mine is a man by the name of Gerald May. Listen, he's not an easy read. He's more like fudge filled with caramels, nuts, chips, all things gooey. Little bites to savor. Too much, you get a tummy ache. Oh, but those bites, they're so filled with deep truth, spiritual insights. The man was absolutely brilliant. He was an addictionologist, poet, an author, and a theologian of the contemplative nature. Even his footnotes were good reads. That's talent. One chapter in his book called The Awakened Heart was titled Expectation and Hope. Oh, and I tell you, coming across it was serendipitous, as my life was pretty devoid of hope at that moment. Matter of fact, I felt as if everything I touched turned into a lime slushy with way too much green syrup. I desperately needed some help cleaning up the mess. Growing up was Pollyanna. True, I was. I had unknowingly put myself into far too many painful situations than what I needed. And reading this chapter in May's book, God, it gave me this giant aha moment, because I really came to see that so many of my heartbreaks were because I did not know the difference between hope and expectation. Allow me to explain. May writes, the difference between the two, hope and expectation, is hope is wishing for something to happen, while expectation is assuming it's going to happen. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, expectations are useful when they're based on fact, and we rely on basic facts, like the sun will rise in the morning, that sort of thing. That is an expectation. Trouble brews, however, when we have our eyes set on false expectations, as in, because the sun rose this morning, all the day will be very pleasant. Oy. I was so good on that assuming part most of my life, and I came to see that it really was the cause of much unneeded heartbreaks. Case in point, annual church picnic. As a child, I thought that was the day everything great happened in the church, and thus my life. What happened was our elders rented out about half the Forest Preserve. I mean, it was a mammoth-sized church. Oh, and they set up tables, and they grilled brats and burgers, and being good German Lutherans, they could even serve beer. I don't know why I remember that, but I did. Oh, the cakewalks from the ladies, all those fresh-baked goodies, and most kind souls shared them after they won, and I knew right where to position myself, because my mother had never made a decadent cake anything, so those cakes were really meaningful. Oh, and we had tug-of-wars for all ages and scavenger hunts. But I tell you, my favorite were the carnival games with kids' booths to earn tickets for ice cream cones and trinkets. Oh, those magic tickets could be turned into the coolest little toys. You know, the kind your parents would never pick up for you. I lived for that church picnic. One year, however, tragedy struck. On the Friday before the picnic, I overheard my daddy, who just happened to be the head pastor and thus God's best friend. I mean, I truly believe that. Anyway, I heard him tell somebody on the phone that there was a 100% chance of rain on Sunday, and they would probably have to cancel the picnic. Cancel the picnic! Oh, God would never let that happen. Dirty, talk to him. Dirty. Took my dad about a good hour talking me off the roof. Emotionally speaking, of course, promising me he would not make a decision until early Sunday morning. But I tell you, I was on my knees every hour reminding God how important that picnic was to world peace, and expecting that he would answer me with a break in the rain, sunshine, and a rainbow for the inconvenience. Hours went on, however, the forecast even got more grim. Thunderstorms, chance of hail. Why was God doing this to me? Okay, what about next Sunday, Daddy? Can we have it then? Please, 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 right? I mean, if God was so mean as to let my picnic get rained out, we could outsmart him. Just move the date. I would survive. Unfortunately, the Forest Preserve was not available. But Daddy was sure they would set things up in the cafeteria and parking lot. Okay, minus the beer, of course. Couldn't do that according to the rules. But no. That just would not do. It would not be the same. I mean, I could not stalk boys in the cafeteria if he was looking and was the pastor's daughter. No, my mind was made up. I wouldn't sing hymns on church on Sunday from there on in. I was so disappointed in God. My expectations were dashed. And I spent all rainy day Sunday in my room. Well, getting back to Gerald May here. This is so true. When our expectations are not met, we are crushed. Why? Well, we held on steadfastly that what we wanted to happen must happen for us to be happy. Expectations are very brittle, and when they collapse, so do we in heart-wrenching pain. This, unfortunately, is when people often blame God for not being true to his promises. They have unknowingly told him how their problems were to be solved and reject him when it doesn't happen according to their script. Well, those with faith then forgive God. And then they go on to write another script of expectations mislabeled as hope. And the cycle continues and continues until depression and desperation sets in. But hope, real hope, is soft. It's willing to suffer pain in the promise of grace. We can hope and even fantasize for glorious tomorrows where all our dreams come true. But we must leave it there in the field of hope, of allowing the freedom that it might not happen, and that God can meet our needs, the needs of the soul, which are often so only known in our hearts, but not in our minds. We can hope the ending will turn out the way we want it to be, but we must leave it open-ended, and wait. Wait with great expectation for God to act, but knowing whatever happens will be for the very best. Now listen, this is a big pill to swallow. Sometimes, especially when it comes to expectation of our own children, like they're going to grow up safe, survive the stupidity of their adolescent choices, move on to careers of our choosing, marry the perfect spouse who adores us and wouldn't mind us living in with them, I mean, if the need arises, and then give us perfect little replicas of themselves as grandchildren, right? Yeah. So what happens when real life shows up? Well, if we're wise, we can soften those expectations and start leaning on hope. That looks so easy on paper. Many times than not, however, making that transfer is difficult, very difficult and painful. Because the more we're attached to an outcome, most cases a person, a family member, the harder it is to pry our little pities off of those expectations. I mean, just this last week, a very dear friend of mine buried her 29-year-old daughter. So many of our lunches in these past few years were conversations about how to keep our kids alive and the fears associated with dancing with the devil. I mean, whereas we had two separate issues, the end point was the same. Dear God, please let our kids survive. So much more at stake here in the church picnic. When last we lunched, I did see my friend. She had moved from expectation to hope, however, and I really stood there amazed as I was far from it. Depression was a chemical issue with her child, and they tried everything. Oh, I mean everything to help her. My friend would not give up fighting, but there was a peace in her heart, hope in a cure, but acceptance that her daughter's healing may only be in heaven. She made the transition from expectation to hope with sadness, but she was at peace. I'm sure it was a major factor why she could speak of grace so eloquently at her daughter's memorial service. As the years go on, life hands us more and more rainy day picnics. We cannot stop the events, and yet we try desperately. And we've got a death grip on what our future is supposed to look like, especially as we age. There's an old saying, insanity is resistance to what is. Well, insanity is also holding on to expectations that our last mile will be like the AARP Hilton commercials. Golf, tennis, world travel, fashionably underweight with strong knees, thriving libido, and a well-stocked retirement portfolio. Others of us would simply be happy to have family members still walking around with us without trips to the oncologist or cemetery. Not too much to ask, we hope. Okay, listen, I still want to lose those 30 pounds, but I have to tell you that when I went from expectation to hope, I did feel much better in my own skin. Surrender, or making the transition from expectation to hope, is talked about in many major traditions. In Islam, the concept of surrender is when a person abides by the 5 main pillars of Islam. Following the faith means surrendering or submitting one's will to God. In Hinduism, Krishna said, "Just surrender to me, and I will deliver you, do not fear." Gerald May speaks of the contemplative Christian tradition when he says, "Hope springs eternal. It cannot die. It cannot die. It is a gift of God and a promise of His grace. It opens us to love because it does not have to be bound by a proven experience to be true. We can see the sun shining and hope it will warm up, if not today, perhaps tomorrow or the next day. In my case, a church picnic or my son's life." In closing, when we live in expectation instead of hope, we unknowingly try to tell God how to save us from our situations and fears. And that totally leaves the possibility of grace out of the equation. God just doesn't work that way. And He keeps reminding us of that fact, but we are so slow. No, God does not give us our orders for the day and then leave us alone to construct our own redemptions. We always try to beat grace to the finish line because we feel security comes from knowing and not from faith. Always trying to outguess the future, it robs us of precious time, of the moment, of the now, of the peace of God. And in the end, isn't that what we are really all after? A little peace? We keep expecting safe passage in a world that is incapable of the task. So we gather ourselves together, wipe away the tears, take a deep breath, forgive what we cannot control, let it go too, and try to go on in hope of a better day.